Alright, we've got news from the gaming industry that might actually be good for once, which is so rare I had to check if hell had frozen over. GOG, only platform that still lets you actually own your bloody games, is splitting from CD Projekt. But here's twist. It's going to one of the original founders who built Place. Could be brilliant, could be slow motion car crash. Let's get into it. Right, so here's what went down on December 29, 2025. Michał Kiciński, one of the co-founders of CD Projekt and GOG, has bought GOG lock, stock and barrel for about $25 million. That's 90.7 million Polish zloty if you're keeping track. But let's stick with dollars, because I can't pronounce zloty without sounding like I'm having a stroke. Now, Kiciński didn't sell his CD Projekt shares to do this. He got external funding, which we'll come back to, because that bit's interesting in a who's you make with deep pockets kind of way. But key thing is, GOG is no longer part of CD Projekt. After 17 years of being weird cousin at family reunion, you know, one who insists on talking about DRM-free gaming while everyone else is counting the cyberpunk microtransaction money, GOG is going independent. CD Projekt's reasoning is actually pretty straightforward, and for once, I'll give them credit for honesty. They want to focus entirely on making Witcher and cyberpunk games. That's the money printer. That's what shareholders care about. GOG, bless it, has been running on what polite business types call razor-thin margins. Translation? Barely profitable enough to justify keeping lights on. It's equivalent to keeping your grand's old Morris Minor running. Sure, it's got character and you love it, but Christ's maintenance costs are killing you. So CD Projekt looked at their books and thought, right, we're making billion-dollar RPGs. Why are we still mucking about with digital storefront that operates on pocket change? And you know what? Fair play. At least they're admitting it instead of pretending GOG was some strategic pillar while they slowly starved it for resources. But here's where it gets interesting. They didn't sell it to Epic. They didn't sell it to some venture capital vulture who'd strip it for parts faster than a chop shop in Rotherham. They sold it to one of the blokes who founded the bloody thing. That matters. Because Kiciński ain't some suit looking at spreadsheets wondering how to monetize your nostalgia. He's one of the people who back in 2008 decided that maybe, just maybe, gamers should actually own games to buy. Revolutionary concept, that. Now, before anyone panics and starts downloading their entire GOG library like it's digital apocalypse, let's talk about what actually changes for you as a gamer. And the answer is bugger all. No, nada. Your GOG account works exactly the same. Your library's still there. Offline installers are still available. DRM-free philosophy? They're actually doubling down on it, which is either genuine commitment or best PR spin I've seen in years. GOG Galaxy, that optional launcher they've got, still optional. Nobody's forcing you to use it. CD Projekt Red games, still coming to GOG, including future releases. They've signed a distribution agreement, which means when Witcher 4 drops, you'll still be able to buy it DRM-free on GOG. That's actually in writing now, which is more than I can say for most corporate handshakes in this industry. Preservation work? That thing GOG does where they dig up old games from digital graveyard and make them playable again? That's not only continuing, it's supposedly expanding in 2026 and 2027. If you care about gaming history not vanishing into the void like fighting a hurricane, that actually matters. Because let's be honest, nobody else is doing this work. Steam can be asked. Epic doesn't even pretend to care. GOG's only one out there saying, yeah, that game from 1997, let's make sure people can still play it in 2027. So on paper, on Tuesday, everything's same as it were on Monday. Your games are safe, your purchases are secure, the DRM-free flag is still flying. For once in this godforsaken industry, so much changed an average gamer didn't get shafted in process. I know, shocking, right? But, and there's always a but, just cause not change yet don't mean not will change. And that's where we need to talk about elephant in room wearing a razor-thin margins t-shirt. Let's start with optimistic angle, because I'm feeling generous, and it's New Year. This might actually be good news. I know, I'm as surprised as you are, but hear me out. First, GOG went to someone who gives a toss. Kiciński co-founded this platform on principle that you should actually own what you buy. Not license it, not rent it, own it. Like you used to own CDs and cartridges and those big beautiful PC game boxes that took up half your shelf. That philosophy ain't marketing gimmick for him. It's reason GOG exists in first place. So if anyone's going to keep playing burning, it's probably bloke who lit it. Second, GOG's now private. And I know what you're thinking. Scotty, how is private ownership good? Aren't you always banging on about transparency? Fair point. But here's the thing, private ownership means no shareholders. No board meetings with some finance prick in a suit. That's why GOG's still supporting 20-year-old games instead of chasing live service money. No quarterly earnings calls where you have to explain why principles don't always translate to profit margins. Private ownership can mean freedom. Freedom to stick to your guns. Freedom to make long-term decisions instead of short-term cash grabs. Freedom to say, no, we're not adding loot boxes to the store. We have some shareholder threatening to tank your stock price. Now, whether Kiciński uses that freedom wisely or pisses it up wall remains to be seen, but potential's there. Third, and this is bit that actually matters if you care about gaming history, preservation work is getting bigger. GOG's been doing loads of work, or at least what Lord would do if he cared about making sure you can still play Fallout 2 on Windows 11. And they're planning even more ambitious rescue missions in 2026 and 2027. That means old games dragged out to licensing hell. More compatible patches. More, oh Christ, I remember playing this when I was 12 moments. And you know what? In an industry that treats everything over 5 years old like archaeological evidence, that matters. Because gaming's only art form that actively tries to erase its own history. You can still watch films from 1920s, you can still read books from centuries ago, but try playing a PC game from 2005 without GOG's help and you're in for a weekend of compatibility fixes, missing DLLs, and wanting to throw your PC out window. So yeah, there's genuine good here. Real, tangible, this could actually improve things good, which in gaming is rarer than a Ubisoft game launching without bugs. Now enough optimism, let's talk about bits that make me nervous, because I'm not made of open fairy dust. First question, external funding. Kiciński used someone else's money to buy GOG. That's not pocket change. That's $25 million of someone else's cash. And here's the thing about other people's cash. They expect it back, usually with interest. So who's bankrolling this? What's their angle? Because nobody drops 25 million quid on a barely profitable platform out of goodness of their heart. Maybe it's patient money from someone who believes in mission. Maybe it's a loan from someone who expects GOG to start printing money. Maybe it's venture capital wearing friendly masks. We don't know, and that's a problem. Because if those backers start getting twitchy about razor-thin margins, and let's be clear, that's corporate speak for we're making bugger all profit, what happens? Do they start pushing for changes? Do they suggest, ever so gently, that maybe DRM isn't so bad? Do they ask why GOG's spending money on preserving old games instead of chasing Fortnite crowd? I'm not saying it'll happen, I'm saying we should be watching out for it. Second question, those margins. Razor thin means one bad quarter away from a problem. Private ownership means no parent company safety net. If CD Projekt, what rich uncle who could bail GOG out when things got tight, that uncle just left building. So what happens if GOG hits a rough patch? If a few big releases skip platform? If Steam or Epic undercut them on price? There's no cavalry coming, it's just Kiciński, his backers, and whatever's in bank account. Third question, how independent is independent when Kiciński still owns a chunk of CD Projekt? He's got feet in both camps now. If CD Projekt decides to launch their own storefront through GOG Galaxy Tech, which they've been building for years by the way, what happens to GOG? That relationship sours for any reason, where does that leave platform? And fourth, big one, how does GOG grow? Steam has decades of infrastructure, Valve's Scrooge McDuck money pile and network effects that make leaving platform painful. Epic's got Fortnite cash to burn on free games and exclusivity deals. GOG has principles, nostalgia, goodwill of aging gamers who'll remember when you could install a game without 17 launchers. Don't get me wrong, I love GOG. I want them to succeed, but wanting it don't make it true. They still have to solve fundamental problem. How do you make you actually own your games profitable enough to compete with platforms built on convenience and lock-in? So here's where I land on this, and I'm trying to be fair because this story actually deserves it. This is best possible version of this scenario. If GOG were going to leave CD Projekt, and let's be honest, it probably had to eventually, having it go to someone who actually cares about DRM-free gaming is infinitely better than any alternative. But wanting it to work don't make it work. Oh, been strategy. And we're independent now into business plan. GOG still has to solve same problems it's always had. They're just solving them without safety net now. What I want to see, and what you should be watching for, is proof this ain't just a passionate rescue that runs out of money in 18 months. Transparency about funding would be a good start. Who's backing this? What's their expectations? Are they in it for long haul, or are they expecting returns that barely profitable platform can't deliver? Actual growth plans would be nice too. With staying independent and sticking to our principles is lovely, but how are you going to grow? What strategy beyond keep doing what we're doing but make more money? Because I'll tell you right now, strategy be ethical alternative and hope people care ain't exactly set world on fire so far. Movement on Linux and Steam Deck support would be good. GOG's Linux support has been patchy at best, and if you're serious about being a gamer-friendly alternative, you need to support platforms gamers actually use. Valve's making Linux gaming more viable whether GOG likes it or not. And finally, proof preservation work expands like they promised. They said bigger rescue missions in 2026 and 2027. Show us, because that's the thing that makes GOG matter beyond just being Steam but with principles. Well, I'm cautiously optimistic here, which for me is like being wildly enthusiastic. This could be GOG getting independence it needs to be what gaming deserves, a place where you actually own what you buy, where old games don't disappear into digital void, where DRM is still a dirty word. That'd be brilliant. That'd be worth celebrating. Or it could be a $25 million bet that don't pay off, and in 18 months we're writing obituary for the last platform that gave a toss about ownership. That'd be heartbreaking. Difference between those two outcomes is whether Kiciński and his mystery backers can figure out how to make principles profitable in an industry that's forgotten what word means. And that's not easy. It's never been easy. If it were easy, everyone would be doing it. But now, your GOG library's safe. DRM-free flag's still flying. Preservation work continues. And for once, for bloody once, we've got a story in gaming that might have a happy ending. But I'm keeping an eye on those margins, because razor thin is just another way of saying one bad year from history. Here's what I'm doing, and here's what I think you should do too. Cautious optimism with vigilant skepticism. Support GOG if you believe in what they're doing. Buy your games there instead of Steam when you can. But watch how this plays out. Watch funding. Watch growth. Watch whether preservation work actually expands or if this just nice PR for announcement. Because this is gaming, and in gaming, good news always comes with a footnote. Let's just hope this footnote don't read, platform shutting down in 2027 due to lack of profitability. Will independence be their salvation or a slow death? Ask me again in a year when we've seen what Kiciński actually does with Place. For now, it's best possible version of this story, which is more than we usually get in gaming. Like, subscribe and all that bullets. Drop your comments and questions below. Tell me if you think GOG's got a fighting chance, or if I'm being too optimistic for my own good. And I'll see you next time, you magnificent.